Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
This gentleman that we're about to interview played 146 games for Fitzroy between 1977 and 1988. He started at full forward, worked his way back to full back, and as Bernie Quinlan once said, there's only one step after that. But we are thrilled to bring onto the radio today Laurie Serafini. Welcome, Laurie. Is he there? Over.
Laurie, good morning.
Guys?
Oh, yeah, got you now.
We lost you for a moment.
Hey.
No, it's, the reception's quite a long way there from Geelong.
That's right. Rob's peddling as hard as he can.
I think you did him an injustice too in that introduction talking about footy, but don't remember, we've had Russell Morris and Ross Wilson on recently, and this man himself, a star, a recorded artist.
Yes, recording artist of the highest note.
Yeah.
Not quite. No, you've been too polite. It was a bit of fun though. It was a little bit of fun back in, might have been 1983, and one representative from each club nominated a player to sing on the album, and I put my hand up straight away because I was a bit of a frustrated muso, and I thought I could see, this is how old it is, I was thinking Bert Newton, Don Lane show, the leagues clubs, this is going to set me up for superannuation. Zero. Didn't go anywhere, sadly. It's in my cupboard at home. I think my brother Renato might have a copy, and I heard my friend may have a copy, and that's it, I think. So total failure, but heaps of fun.
Yeah, that's what we'd like to see. Now, Laurie, the reason, broadly speaking, we chose to try and get in touch with you, and thanks for doing this, you get this weirdo just suddenly send you a note out of nowhere, but that's okay.
Pleasure.
25 years ago during the week, it was the anniversary of Fitzroy playing their last game in the AFL. They're obviously still kicking around at Brunswick Street in the amateurs, but
yes.
A very, very significant moment, not just for people like you and I who love the club, but also for the AFL, the whole merger thing, and there was obviously one or two other opportunities for that to occur. But it was a very, very significant and very sad day.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just do a shout out to all the Roy boys out there?
Absolutely.
In Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth and Tassie. Tonight, big game tonight. But yes, I'd retired, I'd married, I had 3 girls, I still have 3 girls, and the club started slowly going down the gurgler. It was struggling back in the 80s when I was playing, to be honest, and people would remember, there was the mooted to Brisbane, and like every club, you don't want to be leaving the state and sort of being the last person at the club turning the lights off. So we fought hard and fast to raise some money, but eventually the curtains were drawn. The VFL had an idea back then that they wanted to get rid of some clubs and move interstate. I do remember, so technically the last game was Fremantle, wasn't it? WA.
Correct.
But the one that I really think about was the last one in Victoria, which was at the G against Richmond, and it really was a wake. Yeah, it was very melancholy because we had a lot of past players there, which was fun to see some of your old teammates. And then the game turned into a bit of a fiasco. We got our asses kicked. Wasn't good. And there were tears and not so much the players, because you're physically invested in playing the game, but the supporters who come out rain, hail or shine, and in the old days of the old clubs, the old grounds rather, sitting on the fence, and you get to know them as you walked in the race. You're during the seconds game, getting ready for your senior game, and there'd be mums and dads and kids and grandmas and thermoses, blankets. Remember that, the old days?
I do. Very much sitting in the back of the Kevin Murray stand at the Junction Oval.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's where my heart bled, because a lot of people their life was going to the footy. And obviously Fitzroy in this occasion. So very sad, very sad.
I made the decision not to go to that game because I knew it was going to be terribly sad. And so I went to the game the week before, which was at Princes Park with about 10 people and a dog. And it was between two teams called Fitzroy and the Brisbane Bears. And it was a kid called Michael Voss who absolutely tore us to shreds. I let him know that throughout the game that he was never going. And then 6 weeks later, he was our Brownlow medalist. It was quite a weird feeling.
Hey, here's another one just to chip in. There was a player playing in that game for Fitzroy that went on to win 3 wooden spoons and 3 premierships. Pretty rare feat. Would you know who that is?
I'm going to...
Martin Pike?
No, because he won 4 premierships. I'm going to say Chris Johnson.
Take something out of the prize cupboard before you go home tonight. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Good trivia question.
Absolutely.
Good trivia question. Well done.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Yeah.
Because he was one of the 8, wasn't he? He was really the only one that stayed for very long.
Oh, he was great, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, he could play. Hey, Laurie, just on that theme...
He was already up there. Yes, you're right.
Just on that theme of the demise of the club, when you consider the proud history that they had within the competition, and we on the outside, but, I mean, Fitzroy was everyone's second favourite club, and it certainly was mine. I love the stuff you produced during the 80s, but considering the history of the club and the finish, and the more we read about the treatment that you were given and the things that could have happened to make the final part of the club's history so much more enjoyable and proud. Are you a bit bitter and twisted with officialdom, how terrible they treated the club?
Yeah, a little bit. I've gotten over it. But you're right. We were sort of sounded out. I think the Bulldogs were under the pump as well, to be honest. But we were just having trouble with finances at the end of the day. And I think they turned the spotlight on us and we weren't able to get ourselves out of trouble. I remember there in my last seasons, it was ridiculous. Let me think. We were probably moved from the Junction, which we loved playing the Junction, and as you said, had some great success there with Wolsey and Parko in the 80s. But we got kicked off the Junction, and we were now training at the Northcote Oval. And we then, some nights training, we did not know where we were going. We literally got to Northcote and there'd be a note saying, we're at VFL Park tonight. Then we ended up, we left Princes Park and our home ground was, I think, Footscray. Something silly like that. So it really got difficult. When you look at guys today, and I know they're playing in hubs and there's COVID and there's quarantine, but it was really difficult to turn out a professional outfit on a Saturday when during the week you didn't even know where you were training. And clubs, the good clubs in those days, I'm talking the Hawthorns, the Essendons, the Carltons, they had a solid base and they had, the gymnasium and you knew what was going on. And that plays with your head a little bit, just a little bit unsettling. You don't even know it at the time. But when you're all over the place like a mad dog's breakfast, it impacts your game. So the Lions really started to struggle. Yeah, I'm really disappointed. I've got my kids. We've all jumped on Brisbane Lions, which is fantastic. And we enjoyed the success of the three-peat premierships back in the early 2000s. But there's people now that lost love of the club or jumped on the Brisbane Lions or got lost to footy altogether. Really disappointing. And just a last note on that, once I retired, I ended up doing a little bit of writing for the Sunday Age, and I was going to the different games, and I wrote an article that said Fitzroy's best team is actually playing against Fitzroy. So let me explain. So Michael Gale had gone to Richmond, Ross Lyon had gone to Brisbane Bears at that stage. Lynchy had gone to the Brisbane Bears. Roosie had gone to Sydney. Gary Pert had gone to Collingwood. Richard Osborne had gone to Sydney. And I could go on. Paul Broderick went to Richmond. If they had stayed after me, we still would have been very competitive. But unfortunately, the rug got pulled from under us. And it's really disappointing, even what I was trying to say before. When kids, you're trying to take your kids to the footy and you say, well, I played with Fitzroy. And they go, well, we're not around anymore. You've got to explain, well, actually, we're Brisbane Lions now. We merged. And the Lion is a symbol of Fitzroy, who was a founding club of the VFL, and it's got a proud heritage. And it had Bernie Quinlan, it had Paul Roos, it had Kevin Murray, it had Gary Wilson. And that's what I hate, because we've got all the records, I remember we kicked 36 goals, 22 or something, or 32 against Melbourne. We had the VFL record for the highest score back in about 1979, but that's all gone because Fitzroy's not there. So that's what I hate.
Yeah.
A lot of there's thousands of players are now sort of been discarded, where all that record is somewhere hidden in the VFL, AFL, and that's disappointing. And all the supporters, as I mentioned earlier.
I think the thing that I find most annoying about it, Laurie, and I mean, I'm an absolute devout Brisbane Lions man, have been a member now consecutively for 39 years, as I was telling you during the week, which I'm really proud of. I assume when I get to 50, they'll say, stop paying nearly, you've given us enough. Is the fact that the game's record holder for our club, according to official AFL records, is Simon Black. And don't get me wrong, Simon Black is an absolute legend of the club. But there was a fella called Kevin Murray who played a half a dozen games more than what Simon Black did. But as far as the AFL's concerned, it doesn't exist. So when the announcement was made in ironically, I had made the decision I couldn't follow a North Melbourne Fitzroy merged team because of some of the things I thought of North Melbourne. I had made the decision to barrack for the Brisbane Bears because they had maroon on their jumper, ironically. But in 1997, when the club started its new life, I always explain it to people. It's like my daughter got married and moved into state. She changed her name, but fundamentally she's still my daughter. But
good analogy.
You joined the board as a representative, so-called, of the Fitzroy heritage. It must have been both terrifying and exciting at the same time to be setting up a brand new club in an area where they didn't even know what AFL was.
Yes, exactly. And I was in your case. I was thinking, what am I going to do? I had a couple of young kids at that stage, and I thought, right, maybe I'll just go to the MCG and watch the match of the day. Who am I going to barrack for? And I got invited onto the board because Robert Walls was coaching and Scott Clayton put in a word for me. And it was really difficult. But I've got to say, your analogy is an excellent one with the daughter and getting married. But they were okay towards us. And what I mean by that is that, Brisbane Lions realised it is the Brisbane Lions. It's not the Fitzroy Footy Club anymore. They kept all the heritage. If you walk into the rooms down there, there is Kevin Murray, there is Bernie Quinlan, there is Gary Wilson, there is Paul Roos, there is Richard Osborne, photos of. It's fantastic to see that when they play interstate, they wear a red and maroon bluish type jumper with the FFC in front of it. Have you noticed that?
Well,
they're interstate sometimes.
Yeah, and more often with the Fitzroy Lion, but certainly the Fitzroy colours, yes. But occasionally the FFC, yeah.
Yeah, occasionally the FFC this year, I noticed.
Yep.
So that's nice. I was always trying to push that when they played in Melbourne, they'd wear the old Fitzroy jumper. And didn't quite get there. It's been okay, and as I said, it's Brisbane Lions, it's not Fitzroy. But I'd love people to remember that Brisbane Lions is the merger of the Fitzroy Football Club, and all those records you mentioned earlier should stand, and it's annoying when they don't get recognised. And that's what I mean about the 1,100, 1,200 players that played. I'd hate for all that to get lost, absolutely, whether it's one guy or whether it's the record holder, Kevin Murray, and everyone in between.
Laurie, you've had the privilege of being involved with three legends of the game, and I was just doing some maths. I reckon 20 premierships as players and coaches between them. You were coached by Walls and Parkin, and now, of course, the Lee Matthews dynasty at the club. Yes, and you would have seen Lee Matthews up close and personal as a player.
If it wasn't for Laurie, he wouldn't have got the job.
Yes.
So at a time where the club was sort of lacking in so much, to have characters like that as leaders, it must have been a really good part of your career at the club.
Yes. And when you're young, like with Wolsey, I think I might have been 22. He just finished, he's obviously at Carlton, you remember? Went to Fitzroy, had a bit of a fallout with Carlton, comes to Fitzroy. I didn't say this, but I used to barrack for Carlton. Just delete that from the broadcast. So when he came...
With a name like yours, I would not be terribly surprised.
Correct. Born in Rathdown Street, Carlton. True Italian. But when he came across, I went out of my way to introduce myself. And then he retires a year or two later, and I don't think he was the first pick, but because he didn't want too much money and he was negotiable, he got the gig, and that was fantastic. So he was brilliant, and he brought across just a hard approach to football, and he had probably one of the first tactics in the AFL, which was the kick-out huddle. And I was the designated kicker, so I was intimately involved in that little tactic back in about 83. So Wolsey was innovative as well, as hard, and brought the winning atmosphere from Carlton, as was Parko. Parko was, we all know how analytical he was, and also brought the winning success of the Hawthorn and the Carltons. Then we went wobbly, and we became the Brisbane Lions. I just was on the board when there was a bit of a fiasco. John Northey was the Brisbane Lions early coach, and that fell over. And then Roger Merritt was obviously had played there and ended his career at the Brisbane Lions, and he coached for about 6 games, and then he tried some little political ploy that backfired, so he was let go. So we're looking for a new coach, and Andrew Ireland was our CEO, and he yelled out to me in Melbourne, because while I was on the board, I was still living in Melbourne, and he said, "Look, we've got a meeting next week. You're in Melbourne. You're the only guy on the board that played football. I'm coming down. We'd love to interview a couple of coaches." I said, "Sure, love to." So we went roughly where Crown Casino is now, because it was about 1997, and I think the first one was Wayne Britton. Is that correct? Have I got that right? 'Cause he's got a brother. Or was it Craig?
Craig did some coaching up in Brisbane. Wayne was the Carlton coach.
Correct. So
yeah.
Wayne had coached Carlton, was released, let go. So he's applied, and he was a miniature David Parker, and he had a folio of defensive ploys and field tactics. Took us through it, and we sort of finished that appointment. I thought, geez, he's impressive. He said, "Yep." The next guy that came in was this sort of short, wide, dumpy guy from Hawthorn, Lee Matthews. No folders, no bound handouts on defensive ploys. Just had I remember it, just had his mobile phone on and short sleeve shirt, because I think it was October at a warm day. And at the end of it, they said, "Hey, if we can get Lee Matthews, get him." Now, the biggest thing for Lee was, in his, let's say he might have been 45 at that stage, 45 years old, he hadn't been any further than 5-kilometre range of where he grew up, which escapes me at the moment, but down sort of southeast.
Chelsea, Edith Vale Aspendale Footy Club, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So even when he played for Hawthorn, and then when he retired and coached Collingwood, he hadn't left that perimeter. So he said, "Look, I'm interested. I'm keen to try again," because he wasn't coaching. Remember, he was the occasional Victorian coach, but essentially I think he was in the media.
Yep.
So he said, my biggest challenge is literally leaving home and the family and Melbourne. So we quickly convinced him that he should do that, and the rest is history. Fantastic. And he was just fantastic, and obviously was never in the change rooms, but I think just that steely-eyed approach, the success from Hawthorn, he must see the game in a really logical, plain fashion, got the message across in no mean feat. What I mean there is, a spade's a shovel. And he would have the respect of Michael Voss right through to the youngest guy and the youngest recruit. And they were an absolute powerhouse there for 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great time to be involved.
Yeah, and I think had it been now that was going, I think the club might have really struggled. But the fact that it happened sort of 4 or 5 years into the new club or new entity's existence, I think the timing was perfect.
Yes, yeah. Look, I think the year before they may have won the wooden spoon. Lee Matthews gets there, and the year after we might have just missed out on the finals. We might have, let's say it was final 8, we might have finished 9th. Then I think we might have finished 6th.
Yep.
Then we finished 2nd, and then we won premiership, runner-up. So what I'm saying is essentially the same players. And he just, plus recruits, Jonathan Brown came on board, Luke Power came on board, Simon Black came on board, don't get me wrong. But essentially the same players, plus some recruits. Martin Pike doesn't even get invited up there. He finished at Fitzroy, you might remember, doesn't get invited up there. He goes to North, wins the premiership. Somehow, I heard this story only recently, somehow they get to about this time of the season, it might have been October, November, and they're looking at the next year's list. This is Lee Matthews and Gubby Allen, and somehow Martin Pike comes on the scene, And unfortunately, his reputation precedes him. And it's look, he's interested and he's available, but no, bit of a track record. And Lee, to his credit, said, "I like the way he plays. Let's just interview him." And I won't go into the whole story. We haven't got time. But he lands up there. So he's got 1 premiership, and he's now got 3. So he's got 4 in total. Amazing story. Mel Michael gets flicked from Collingwood for some indiscretion. He lands up there, 3 premierships. Talk about timing.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. And of course, Martin Pike holds the distinction of being the last person to be awarded the Fitzroy Best and Fairest.
Yes.
In 1996. So he could play, no doubt, in the world.
Oh.
Now, one other interesting, we sort of sailed past, we should let you go because you've got things to do, but one interesting trivia piece, I suspect, that you and your brother Renato share, and I know that Jared and Tom Berry share, and it probably happens in other clubs, but not very often, and that is brothers who wore the same number at the same club, because Renato wore number 10, didn't he, for a while?
Correct. Yes, then they handed it on to me.
Yeah, because the two Berry brothers have both worn number 13. Jared is now number 7. Did you get to play against Renato when he was at Carlton?
I don't think so. Not quite. No, not quite. Almost did. He was there for 2 seasons and then went on, had a great distinguished VFA career. Well, I think we played together at Fitzroy, but then he left and I stayed, and that was the end of that. Just before we wind up, talking about all things Brisbane Lions, let's not forget that Collingwood have just appointed an ex-Brisbane Lions triple premiership player as their senior coach. Let's throw that in.
I think there's a fair chance that he might be joined by another triple premiership Brisbane Lions player as his assistant coach. I think it's a chap called Justin Lepich, who's very close to the top of that list.
Yes, and just to take it further, and I know we need to wrap up, a dual premiership Brisbane Lions player last night coached Geelong, and a former Fitzroy player is now coaching together with a former Brisbane Lions triple premiership captain at Port Adelaide. I mean, Ken Hinkley came down to Fitzroy for 2 years, did like the city life, and made a great career at Geelong. And Vossi's his assistant at Port Adelaide. So we've got tentacles everywhere, the Brisbane Lions, Fitzroy people.
Oh, there's a fellow called Nigel Lappin who's doing a fair bit of work at Geelong at the minute as well. Blake Carousel out at Essendon. So there's a lot of talk about the impact that Alistair Clarkson has had on the coaching stakes, but I think Lee Matthews' impact on that, and take into account people like Nathan Buckley and also Tony Shaw that coached at Collingwood that he had a bit to do with as well. So I don't think it can be understated, can it?
No, great record.
There's some homework for you, Laurie, when you got a low time in lockdown. We know that Tommy Hafey, I think it was something like 17 players that he'd coached went on to coach. Yeah. Lee Matthews may starting to get something in that neck of the woods, either coach or very prominent assistant coach. So there's a bit of homework for you when you're doing your Fitzroy stuff. Good idea.
Thank you, guys.
Laurie, it's been an absolute thrill to chat to you. You and I have run into one another a few times since you gave it away, but coming out of left field and saying, hey, how about a chat about Fitzroy? Certainly appreciate you putting some time aside on a Saturday morning to chat to these two hacks down here in Geelong.
That was a pleasure. It was like speed dating, but thoroughly enjoyable, guys. Have a good day.
And I will pass your warmest on to the great Johnny Newnham, who will be listening this morning, and another old Fitzroy legend.
Yeah, regards, John. Yep, take care. And all the Roy boys out there and all the Roy boy fans, let's hope we win tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks, Laurie. All the best.